Welcome to CWJah Talk number 36. What is truth? It's a question you've probably asked yourself, and maybe even one you've heard asked by a famous or somewhat famous person from the first century, almost 2,000 years ago, asking another certainly famous person as he stood before him. And the one who asked this question most famously that I'm referring to is Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor of ancient Judea in the first century, referenced in the New Testament, in the book of Luke, as one of the figures involved during the time when Jesus was alive. And in the book of John, chapter 18, that we're going to read in part in a moment, when Jesus was alive and he was before Pilate, and Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" It's one of the few times Jesus does not answer a direct question. There are other times, especially when he doesn't believe the person asking is deserving of an answer. And even occasionally he'll ask a question in response to a question before he'll answer. But when he's before Pilate, it's a different situation. And you'll see why in just a moment. But it is one of the times he does not reply. And so it's left people wondering, what is truth? Now, I believe, as I'm going to show this evening, that the answer is actually given, and even given by Jesus, just not before Pilate. But the question that Pilate asked has lingered in a way that certainly those who don't accept Jesus as the biblical Messiah, based on pre-Christian texts and other evidence that I've discussed, they're not going to reflect on Jesus very much, if at all, when it comes to Pilate's question. But tonight, that's what we're going to do, right? So if you're not convinced that Jesus is the biblical Messiah, that's fine. We don't judge you or think less of you. We just recognize you're not a Christian believer like we are. So when it comes to certain things, then we don't share those in common, just like you don't share things in common with us that we don't believe the same as you. But I have discussed evidence, right? This isn't just my religious point of view and I've grown up and I only feel this way because it's convenient. No, I've done the things I've done because I believe them. And I've prepared a couple things recently that if you haven't come to believe in Jesus the way I have, again, that's fine, but maybe you can consider them. The first one is this article here. I'll show it to you. I'll put a link in the description below to this video. It was written a little more than a couple years ago in 2018, Non-Biblical Evidence for the Historicity of Jesus Christ. So this goes through what I consider the best non-biblical evidence that points to Jesus as a real historical figure. And in addition to that, I've also done a video. You can see it at the top here where my cursor is. It's a part of this same series we're doing this evening. It's number 27, Non-Biblical Evidence for Jesus' Historicity. And I go through the evidence that I provide in this article so that you can consider it with me. And one of the individuals that I review is Cornelius Tacitus, a famous Roman historian of the first century, who also wrote about or referenced Jesus, or the Christ, who suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius, just like is referenced in Luke 3:1, by Pontius Pilate. And so I provide a reference to the account in Tacitus that you can read online for yourself. I also provide a link to the stone found in the 1960s that is inscribed to Pontius Pilate, referencing also the Emperor Tiberius, and referencing the area where he was governor, Judea, and so consistent with the account in Matthew 27. More recently, we have found a metal ring. Looks like the link on that is not active. Let's see if I can find it real briefly here. The metal ring of Pontius Pilate. And there you see it right here. It's also listed on the thumbnail of the video. It's just somewhat small in this caption. Right here on the right side for CWJah Talk 27 is the ring of Pontius Pilate. And on the left side is the inscription that we reviewed just a moment ago. So I'll put a link to that video and to the article below. But we have good evidence showing that Pontius Pilate is a real historical figure. And that's very important. Right? We don't want to just hope we have the truth. Hope is a good thing, especially if it's based on good things, right? Good evidence, good reasons. We believe we have good reasons. We have good reasons to believe that Pontius Pilate lived. Just like the biblical records and Tacitus and the inscription and his ring suggest he lived. And we have evidence that points to Jesus as a real historical figure. One piece of that evidence is the same ancient historian, Tacitus, who refers to Pontius Pilate. So the evidence is pretty convincing, at least to me and to many other people. And it's certainly not a fantasy. And it doesn't have much of an equal when it comes to historicity, that is, the figures in the Bible, in this case Pontius Pilate and Jesus of Nazareth. So with the evidence showing that Pontius Pilate is a real historical person, and with the evidence that I provided on my track list on the CWJah tube channel to show that Jesus is the biblical Messiah according to pre-Christian texts and evidence, with that in mind, even if you haven't reviewed it all, but just knowing that we've presented it and it's there for you to consider, whether or not you're a Christian, let's go into this account involving Pontius Pilate, where he asks Jesus this question: what is truth? Right? And let's see if we can figure out why Jesus does not answer him. And then let's find out if he answers the question anywhere in the New Testament. And if so, what is truth? To assist us in this process, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the New World Translation because I'm familiar with it. I understand a lot of people don't use it, especially if you're not familiar with the Watchtower Society or a member of it. I don't care. I'm not here to cater to your translation needs, and I'm quite capable of servicing my own. So if you don't have something that's pretty convincing to show me why we should use your Bible, that I'm more willing than not to guess doesn't even use a credible form of the divine name in the thousands of times it's supposed to be in it, you want to go ahead and use that Bible, you go ahead. I'm going to use the New World Translation or any text that I want to use and that I can show is correct. I just hope you can do the same. With that in mind, you can follow in your own text or you can follow here with me. Let's go ahead and go to John 18. This is the account where Pilate asked Jesus the question, what is truth. So Jesus, now there's certain circumstantial factors, right? This isn't the normal situation where Jesus is out with his disciples, and he comes across the scribes and the Pharisees or just the people, and they're asking him questions, right? And of course, at times even that got difficult and burdensome, but here before Pilate is different. He has been abused by the Jews in this context, right? It's not a reference to the Jews of all time or even all the Jews at this time. So any of our Jewish friends who are watching this, you should understand what I'm saying contextually, because that's how I'm talking about it. I'm talking about what's discussed in these accounts and by these people, what they are said to have done. So they obviously spit on, humiliated, and beat Jesus in ways where even if he hasn't gone through the full treatment with Pilate yet, he's still not in a good place, right? So it's not like answering questions is going to be the best thing to do, especially when he's already gone through that with the difficult Jews. And so here we are after a night like that, before the Sanhedrin, after being betrayed, going through all that grief in the Garden of Gethsemane. Here he is before Pilate, right? The governor of Judea, the Roman governor of Judea, the one who has authority over him, at least to some extent, right? In John 19, we probably won't get to it, but even Jesus says he wouldn't have any authority if it wasn't given to him from above. But in any case, he has the authority given to him from above. And so, in John chapter 18, now Pilate is known to us who are familiar with Christianity as a more reasonable, at least it seems, person to deal with, right? I mean, he seems like he's wanting to give Jesus a fair hearing. He doesn't really seem like he cares too much for the religious leaders who are bringing him there. Or if he does, he's certainly open to listening to Jesus. Now, he did have his wife tell him about a dream. So he's been warned there's certain unusual things for sure. And he has Jesus in front of him, okay? This is the man. He's now heard about. His wife's had a dream about him. And Jesus is not your ordinary average person, right? He may look like the way Isaiah 53 describes the servant who would come in a way that isn't as, appealing as most people think, right? Because that's not his goal. His goal isn't to be the most good-looking Savior. His goal is to get the job done, to be a good person, to be the sent forth one, to show us his Father, right? Not have us distracted by himself. Now, so he's still, though, even though he's not this great appealing person everyone thinks he is in the way that his form is described in Isaiah 53, he's still impressive, right? The guards who were sent out to get him earlier, they couldn't deal with him. He was very impressive. He's been beaten down a little bit here, but he's still the Son of God in our view. He's still the Messiah. He still has strength of character, confidence, but he's being challenged. And all of this is happening with Pilate now. Pilate cares and doesn't care. Right? This isn't like it's becoming a bigger deal, right? The dream thing, and the Jews are bringing him, and he doesn't really understand why, and Jesus seems different. Okay, now with that in your mind, let's see. Verse 33. So Pilate entered into the governor's palace again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" So that's the first question at this point. Verse 34, Jesus answered this question. But look at what he says, right? Remember I said he sometimes answers a question with a question. Does it right here. Is it of your own originality? Right? Is this of yourself, is the way the Greek puts it. Are you asking this of yourself, or did others speak to you about me? Or as the NWT says, is it of your own originality that you say this, or did others tell you about me? Now, I don't want to get off the topic too much, but Trinitarians, He clearly doesn't know all things. Because he says right here, he doesn't know whether or not Pilate is speaking of his own or what other people told him, right? So even though he can read hearts, he knows what's in a man, he doesn't know all things. He doesn't have the abilities he's being given in Revelation where he can read the heart and kidneys of all people, it seems. At least not right here, right? And there's no indication this is only his human nature in a way where he doesn't differentiate like you guys do. Either way, it's not that significant, right? We know from his own admission he doesn't know the day and the time of the end. Only the Father knows that. He says that, but same issue that comes up, right? Human nature or not. Well, we'll get to it another time. But I want to point that out right here because he's clearly not aware of what's going on in Pilate. Right? Is this of you or did others tell you about me? Right? Why are you saying this? I'm not sure. And Pilate answers Jesus. So they're having a dialogue here. I am not a Jew, am I? Right? He's a Roman governor. He's sent to kind of keep control of the Jews. That's why they hate the Romans. That's why they don't like each other. Well, I mean, I'm sure they got along in different times and ways where they had to. But it's never really a good relationship when you have an occupying nation telling you what you can and can't do in many respects. So he says, I'm not a Jew. Your own nation. Right? He's looking at Jesus. You're a Jew. I'm not a Jew. Your nation and your chief priests, your main people, gave you to me. What did you do? So now Pilate is he's had that dream told to him from his wife, and there's things going on here. And they're actually talking. It's very interesting when you stop and think about it and put yourself in the moment and the people that are talking and what's at stake here. Verse 36, Jesus answered, my kingdom is no part of this world. If my kingdom were part of this world, my attendants would have fought that I should not be delivered up to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from this source. Right? Because that's what they're all concerned about. The Jews are bringing him to Pilate saying that he spoke against Caesar. Right? This is the charge that they're using to coerce Pilate to kill him. Because they can't really bring up the charges according to their own law that would convince Pilate. But if it's involving a threat to Caesar, that's why he's there, to crush any kind of thought that there's any king but Caesar. That's a big deal. That's why he asks him, are you the king of the Jews? That's what he wants to know. Right? Is this what they're saying true? Are you claiming this? Okay, we're Rome. We're in control. Are you the king of the Jews? My kingdom is no part of this world. If it was, they would have fought. My kingdom is not of this source. It's not from this world. Right? Because we already know his kingdom is going to be in the new world. But the kingdoms of the earth are God's arrangement according to Romans. We know that. But this is not how it's supposed to be, right? These aren't the kingdoms of the world that are supposed to be here. They're just what we have here now. Because we're here in this condition, and that's what makes up the kingdoms that we have now. And has been since the beginning, because we've been that way since the beginning. So Pilate says, okay, your kingdom is not from this source. Okay, that's good. Well, like I said up here, are you a king? Jesus answered him again. You are saying I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into the world. What does that remind you of? Come into the world. He came into the world, and the world did not recognize him. John 1, we'll get to it. For this reason I have come into the world. What reason? That I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone that is on the side of the truth listens to my voice. That's quite a bit. I mean, so Pilate now must just be in a state of amazement, right? He must really not know what to do here. Because his wife has told him she had a dream and to watch out, be careful about this man. The Jews are acting really strange, even for, in his mind, the Jews, right? Because he already thinks they're different. He doesn't like them usually. That's not the relationship they had. Or at least that is represented by the way Pilate handles Jesus here. And the way he keeps going back out to them and trying to release him when he knows that they don't want that, right? So he's clearly not on trying to appease them. Not willingly. And so after Jesus tells him that this is why he's been born, this is why he came into the world, to bear witness to the truth. And that everyone who's on the side of the truth listens to him. Right after that, we get to our subject text. John 18:38. Pilate said to him, to Jesus, after Jesus just said that to Pilate, "What is truth?" After saying that, Pilate went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him." So, what do you think about that? We get to this point here, and he emphasizes that the reason he came into the world was to bear witness to the truth, and that everyone who's on the side of the truth listens to his voice. Pilate hears that, right? Pilate hears all of it. I mean, he's getting information here that he doesn't process, or he can't process it. He doesn't understand the law and what it points to in terms of the figure like Moses and what this is all about, right? Preparation of the body, the Messiah, none of it. He knows they have a law, he knows they do all these things, and they have a history, but he's not there to judge according to those things. But he's hearing all this. He has the thing with the dream, the way the Jews are acting, a lot of strange stuff. And it can't put it together, it seems, right? What is truth? Right? You haven't said anything totally wrong. He didn't really seem to care. I take the way he reacted to Jesus saying that he said he was a king, like basically affirming that he is saying he's a king, but having Pilate say it. Well, it seems like that is what Pilate was saying, right? It seems like Pilate did regard him in a way that even Pilate couldn't deny. So you almost had to be there with them to see why. Because for Jesus to say that to him, if it wasn't true, Pilate might not have really reacted nicely. But if it was true, if what Jesus said to Pilate was true, that Pilate really was regarding him as a king by his question, well then you can see why Pilate wouldn't be upset about it, right? So this is the disposition, the mindset, but it's probably why Jesus was talking to him. But then when he got to the point where he just said, "What is truth?" right? Because Jesus had just done what? He had just told him what he was there to do, right? What didn't he tell Pilate? Well, he didn't really tell him who he was, did he? He affirmed he was the king of the Jews based on how Pilate was viewing him in his question. But Pilate didn't really put it together in a way that took it seriously, right? Okay, fine, you think you're special in relation to the Jews. I don't see that you're a threat here, right? You've already said your kingdom isn't of here. You're talking kind of weird. I think you're something special about you. That's true. So what you're saying is true. Okay, but what is truth? You say everyone who's on the side of the truth listens to you? I don't know, I don't even know if you're king of the Jews. You're kind of saying you are. What is truth? The reason I don't believe Jesus answered Pilate openly is because Jesus knew or believed, if you're like me, but believe in the extent that you know, just like when you go out and you're going to drive a vehicle, you don't think you're going to die or get in an accident, right? You think you follow the rules of the road and everything else, 100% you're going to live. When we know that's not true. So there's that kind of knowing that exists. I believe the reason he didn't explicitly answer Pilate when he said, "What is truth?" even though he had been talking to him all this time, is because he didn't need to. The truth was standing right in front of him. And more than that, what Jesus knew was that his Father was right in front of Pilate. And it was his Father who chose not to have the Son answer any further, because that wasn't what he was there to do. Remember, as we'll get to further in a moment, John 14. What Jesus does is because of the Father. It's the Father working through Jesus. What does Jesus say over and over? We're going to read in a moment. I don't judge. I don't say. I'm not here, but I hear, I judge. I was told what to say. Do you think if the Father wanted Jesus to answer Pilate, that Jesus wouldn't have answered him? Of course not. So, understand that what's really happening here is the Father is near. Father is there all the way until the end when he releases his Son so that he can be with him again. And the last Adam will have done what he was foretold to do. What does he say right here? He was sent in the world to do. Bear witness to the truth. What's the first thing God said would happen? The seed. The seed is the promises in Genesis 3 for everything that took place that wasn't according to God's will. And everything thereafter that's taken place has been according to God's will because he's allowed it or caused it to occur. Jesus came not because of his own will, but because of the Father. He came because of the Father to bear witness to the truth. He, according to our belief, and as I'm showing in the Bible and Pre-Christian Evidence, Jesus is the Messiah series, is that seed. He is literally the truth God foretold in a physical human form, standing right before a representative of the greatest kingdom on earth at that time, who's asking him what is the truth. When he is the Messiah, who just told him those who listen to him are on the side of the truth. And he is, in fact, the truth. Like he tells us in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, as I mentioned in my last video about whether we pray to Jesus or Michael, to or through Jesus or Michael, who's more important? The truth, and by that I mean Jesus, right? So this is like, who's more important than that, right? Right. What did I say in that video? The one who taught the truth, Let's go to John 1 real quickly. Let's go and combine what we read right here about him coming into the world to bear witness to the truth in John 18:37 with what we read in our Bible in the Trinity and Conflict series on John 1 about how the Word says he was in the world, the world came into existence through him, but the world did not know him. He came to his own home, but his own people did not take him in. He was full of undeserved kindness and truth. And then just a couple verses later, verse 17, because the law was given through Moses, and undeserved kindness and the truth came to be through Jesus Christ. So how is the Word who came into the world as an only begotten Son from a Father, why is this one full of truth? Why did undeserved kindness and truth come to be through Jesus after the Word became flesh, according to verse 14? Let's take a look at John chapter 7. We're going to stay in John for the most part this evening because even though I could go to other texts, most of it is in John, and it will help us to maintain a connection with the overall narrative rather than jump from different book to book just to prove the same point. John chapter 7, and certainly John discusses this and has Jesus talking about this quite a bit. Why is Jesus the Word as he became Jesus, or even if it's the Word after Jesus was resurrected? Either way, it's not the issue this evening. The Word in John 1:1, who became Jesus, according to John 1:14, is full of truth, undeserved kindness and truth. John 18:37, came into the world to bear witness to the truth. John 14:6, I am the truth. How can you teach the truth? The truth. Easy. Jesus says so right here. John 17. Let's start in verse 14. When by now the festival was half over, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. Therefore the Jews fell to wondering, saying, how does this man have a knowledge of letters when he has not studied at the schools? Verse 16, Jesus in turn answered them and said, what I teach is not mine, but belongs. It's not mine, it actually belongs to him that sent me. My teaching, everything I'm teaching. He was full of undeserved kindness and truth. I am the truth. What I teach, what I, the truth, teach is not mine. Now, do you see how the truth can be taught the truth? Because the truth is right here telling you about being taught. By the same one that he said as the truth, he was there so that you could be brought to him, the Father. Verse 17, if anyone desires to do his, not mine, his will, he will know. If you want to do the Father's will, you will know concerning the teaching that is not mine. You'll know concerning that teaching whether it is from God Trinitarians. He says right here, the teaching is not his, but belongs to him that sent him. And we'll know concerning the teaching if it's from God or from himself. Right here, in the most explicable terms I can imagine, the Son of God makes plain not only is what he is teaching here not his, but it's from God, who is differentiated by him from himself. And you'll say, well, that's the Father, second person of the Trinity. That's the interpretation that comes later. That's not how God is presented here. And it doesn't say even God the Father. I know it's the Father. One God the Father. 1 Corinthians 8:6. So once again, you see that God is not used in a personal way. It is clearly separate as an individual being from the one whose teaching his is, right? So his teaching is being represented in this one that is not him. And that's the whole point Jesus is making. That's his argument. It's kind of like John 10, only not as explicit with God's, right? But in terms of the separation and what they know, right? You have to be taught, one's teaching him. Because remember, he came into the world full of what? Undeserved kindness and truth, right? It's not like God taught him all this while he became a man. And even so, you believe he's a God-man. So he's speaking of himself as himself, his own self, of himself. He doesn't say of his human self or of any distinction like that, which is what you guys need to do to preserve some kind of association with later doctrine. But we don't have that problem. We don't have that doctrine. You can have it. Go ahead. This is why we don't, though. I'm pointing this out so you understand how explicit Jesus himself is when it comes to his relationship with God the Father as God, not as a person of God. That's not what we're taught. That's now not how it's taught. It's taught in terms of a separation from God. That doesn't mean polytheism. It means sons of God theology. So use the right term. It'll sound much better. But he goes on, okay? Jesus then says, he that speaks of his own, of himself, of his own originality, is seeking his own glory. But he that seeks the glory of him that sent him, the one Jesus just absolutely distinguished himself from, God. And we know that the glory is not the same according to John 1, right? Because Jesus' glory is that of a monogenes. That can't be the Father's glory. So these are all very basic teachings, but they come up over and over again, right? This is how explicit Jesus is. He differentiates himself from God and his teaching from God and his glory from God, right? Because otherwise he'd be seeking his own glory. If he was co-equal with the Father in glory, then he wouldn't be seeking a separate glory. It's the same glory, just shared in your terms, a different person. But it'd be the same glory, because it'd be the same glory from the same essence of God. That the three persons share co-equally, according to you. But here, that's not what we're told at all. We're told explicitly what he teaches is not his, that his will is different, right? If anyone desires to do his will, he'll know concerning the teaching whether it's from him or I'm talking to myself, which I'm not doing. I'm telling you what he said. What I teach is not. It's a denial. It's not mine. None of it. It's what I'm telling you. All this undeserved kindness and truth. It's not mine. But I'm the truth. John 14:6. Everyone on the side of the truth. John 18:37. The word is full of truth. John 1:14-17. The truth is taught the truth. Now, who would you have to be to do that? He that seeks the glory of him, this one is true, and there's no unrighteousness in him. Let's take a look further. John 8:16. Who is this one who's teaching the truth? The one who, if you're on the side of the truth, you're on this one side, well, that one's taught by someone else. And he denies that what he's taught is his. The truth, the one who calls himself the truth, whom we accept as the truth, says what he's teaching as the truth is not his. John 8:16. He's talking again to the Pharisees here who oppose him. He says, if I judge, my judgment is truthful. Why is Jesus' judgment truthful? Because he's God? If he was God, wouldn't it be truthful because he's God? Right? Because God doesn't lie, he can't lie, and he's God, so he would know all things and be truthful about them. But he says here, his judgment is truthful because he's not alone. The Father is with him. Now, you might argue in some sense this has to do with having another witness about yourself like the Jews are accusing him of. But either way, he associates truth again, not just with himself, but with the Father, is what I want to point out there. But the main part is right here, verse 26. I have many things to speak concerning you. He's talking to the Pharisees who are opposing him. And to pass judgment on. As a matter of fact, he that sent me, and this goes back to John 7, where he was talking about the teaching not being his, but belonging to the one who sent him. He that sent me is true. And this is the truth. John 14:16, the truth. The one whose side you're on, if you listen to the truth, John 18:37, says, he that sent me is true. And the very things I heard from him, I am speaking in the world. Now notice he makes a distinction between speaking them in the world and hearing them from him. And I believe that's because he heard them from him when he was with him in heaven before he became a man. Which is why John opens up his gospel narrative by saying the Word was first with God in heaven. Because this is where he heard all this stuff. And then he came into the world full of this truth, as the truth, teaching the truth that's not his to begin with. It's what he heard. Right? And if he heard as the Word, that's time. He's learning. Just like Proverbs 8 says, wisdom was glad before him all the time. Learned all these things. Help him put all these things together. Knows us. Just like his own mind. Because that's what produced us. Him and his Father. But here now the Word is separated from the Father and become a man and is speaking what he heard from the Father as a man in the world. I heard these things. I learned these things. It's not mine. What I'm telling you, it's not mine. I heard it. I learned it. I'm repeating it. I know where this came from. Let's continue with it. They didn't grasp he was talking to them about the Father. Excuse me. Therefore, Jesus said, when once you have lifted up the Son of Man, referring to himself, then you will know that I am he. NWT uses he here because ego eimi refers back to the Son of Man, the one he's referring to. That's how ego eimi works. John 9:9, for example. And that I do nothing of my own initiative or of myself. He does nothing of his own. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't eat or do things that he wants to in those ways. It's talking about the teaching, right? What's been the subject from John 7 forward, at least. And then here, with him saying, just as the Father taught. My teaching, John 7, is not mine. It belongs to him that sent me. You'll know concerning the teaching that's not mine, whether it's from that one or from me. Right? See, I'm making a clear separation. It's not from me. I just said that. You'll know it's not from me if you just listen to what I'm saying. Why? Because I don't do anything of my own. I'm not here telling you what I think. Right? This is why I tell Trinitarians and everybody all the time, we need to understand who we're dealing with. Right? Thomas finally got it in John 20. And Jesus had to tell him exactly what that meant leading up to it in John 20:17. But they understood it. Just like everyone in the Hebrew Scriptures understood that the beings before them were representing him. It's not my teaching. These aren't my words. I'm telling you what I heard from him. I'm telling you what he taught me. I didn't know it at one time. I was like a child, glad before him all the time. Learning, being taught, and then coming beside him as a worker, as someone who could assist and put things together, like a carpenter's son, the very role given to him as a man by his Father. And verse 29, he that sent me is with me. He didn't abandon me to myself, because I always do the things pleasing to him, exactly like wisdom says in Proverbs 8. I was glad before him all the time. Verse 30, as he was speaking these things, many put faith in him. Verse 31, and so Jesus went on to say to the Jews that had believed him, if you remain in my word, you are really my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So what is he saying? You remain in my word, you'll know the truth, truth will free you. What's the truth? What is truth? Pilate asked Jesus. It was standing right in front of him. It was Jesus in the Christian sense, or in the fulfillment of the seed sense, in which the Father was speaking through him and bringing about the very thing he promised he would. And that's why Jesus is attributing everything to him. I don't do anything of my own. You Trinitarians and others keep saying I'm calling myself the I am and I'm equal with the Father. No. Father's greater than I am. John 14:28. I don't do anything of my own. John 8:28. Father taught me. John 8:28. And the text we've read before about him hearing from the Father, about the teaching not being his but the one who sent him, about him coming into the world full of truth, as the truth, being taught the truth. Let's take a look now at John 17. One last text. You can share with me if you have your text or your Bibles open, or if you're just watching on the screen, or listening, I suppose, when I start reading. And here Jesus states explicitly, a text we've all read many times, about the truth and what must have been in his mind when Pilate asked him, what is truth? Because he had just told him that what he says is the truth. Right? If you're on the side of the truth, you what? You listen to his voice. Why would that be true? Well, what's his voice doing? It's telling us what? The teaching that is true, that is not his, but from one that is true. And so because he's actually repeating it and not deviating from it, he's the truth. Everything he says is correct. Why? He's not adding to it. It's not of his own self. It's not his. He's repeating it as he learned it from God himself. And so when he says here in John 17, sanctify them by means of the truth, your word is truth. Now, oftentimes I think Christians misuse this text because we sometimes have applied it to use as an argument that the Bible is the truth, like because we call the Bible the Word. And so we sort of see this as Jesus saying that the words that we accept as part of the Bible are the truth. And we want to avoid that because it can be a circular argument, one that assumes that the Bible is true and then uses the Bible to prove that the Bible is true. That's not truth, even if it's true. We want to make sure that we're arguing correctly. And so when Jesus is talking about what is truth here, he's talking about the words he was told to tell everybody to do. Everything you told me is what I'm repeating. I don't do anything of my own. It's not my teaching. It's from you. Your word is truth. And I am the way to you. John 14:6. I am the truth in the sense that what you tell me is true. If I start doing my own thing, you'll know right away, right? What did he say in John 7? Let's go back to it real briefly. He said, it was so interesting, was it not? He says, you'll know concerning the teaching, whether it is from God. This is very important in many ways, but for this evening, the teaching, the truth, what is it? You'll know concerning the teaching, whether it's from God or you're speaking of your own originality, of his own in this case, right? Which is so significant. It shows the difference that he's making, the distinction, how significant it is. And yet, it really is no different, is it? Because if he's only repeating what he was told by God himself, what's the difference? There's no difference. No difference whatsoever. And that's the whole point he's making. It's not his. The moment he goes outside of that, it is. And then there could be a problem. He doesn't fall into that trap. He already knows who knows what's right. And so he repeats that, what he heard, what he was taught, what Pilate knew and saw, but just couldn't really figure out because it wasn't Jah's will for him to figure out. It was his will for him to have authority to be here where he was at that time and to do things with his own mind in ways that would show his heart and allow Jah to see him in ways that he probably never figured were a part of that encounter, although he knew it was some kind of encounter that was not typical. And so in asking that question, I believe it's clear, at least from a Christian perspective, that the reason Jesus didn't answer it is because, one, he knew Pilate, if he wanted to, already could see. Just like he could see he was the king of the Jews, and yet questioned it. Right? Twice he asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Well, are you the king of the Jews? You're the one who's saying it. You're the one who believes that. You're the one who feels that way towards me, I can tell. But what is truth? Right? Why repeat myself? I just told you what truth is. Truth is when you listen to my voice. Truth is when you listen to what you can tell by listening to my voice. Or when your wife tells you about what she experienced in a dream. And you can see all these different things. My Father can see you thinking about these things while you're thinking about me. And whatever he says, believe me, that's the answer to your question. That's the truth. So when it comes to answering or discussing the truth with different people who may not be like us in terms of explaining things from a Christian perspective, right? When it comes to Jesus being the one sent by the Father to teach us his will, to fulfill all these pre-Christian texts, to be the prophet greater than Moses, who would lead us into the place that is next. When we're talking with people who are Christians, it's going to be much easier for them to answer that question because we can point to these texts that speak of Jesus as the truth and the way that he is represented and represents the one who taught him all these things. And that'll be our greatest challenge in dealing with people, like we had a little bit in our pre-show. But that's okay, as long as we can keep trying to work together in ways that show we're on the side of the truth. We might be wrong sometimes, and that's okay. It's not okay to become overly anxious or doubtful in ways like Thomas and others where you don't know what to say in a basic sense so that you can have a relationship with God and with Jesus and with other people who believe in them. This is our greatest challenge today because so many things are getting in our way to where we can't even have two or more, a small group, as much as we might like to have more, praying and working together in a way that would fulfill texts that we know that speak of him being present with us if we do those things in the right way. So it is important that we understand the truth, but it's also important that we work together even if we don't agree on everything that we think is true. We have to do that at times because we're not going to see everything clearly. And we can point out things that are wrong. We should do that. We're told to do that. Jesus did that. But he also didn't correct Pilate on every point, or even answer him when he felt he had already made his point, or when it was so obvious he didn't need to say anything else. So there's a lot we can learn from this account in John 18 when it comes to answering the question, what is the truth? And or how we go about dealing with others who believe things like we do, but not everything that we do. That seems to be one of our greatest challenges today. Or just finding the right place in our mind to be able to approach God right and say, I'm confident I'm doing things the right way. I'm confident I'm on the way to you. I'm confident I know what is the truth.